morning. Welcome to Coffee with Bann. Today's brew is Moose Munch Maple Walnut, and today's topic, the third generation of Pokemon games. Ooh. Oh yeah. Oh, that ain't bad. I like that. Ooh. Might be partially the brown sugar in there. I added a little bit of brown sugar here because we didn't have any regular cane sugar, whatever. But that is good. I like that. So, Gen 3 of Pokemon. I think I could reasonably call it my favorite generation of Pokemon. And probably one of my favorite games of all time. Particularly Pokemon Sapphire, which is what I've got here. So, Gen 3 of Pokemon, particularly Sapphire, is one of my favorite games. For a couple of reasons. A, it's generally good game, me likey. But B, it is one of the first video games I ever beat. I think second only to Sonic CD. The Christian Whitehead port specifically. Now, I always have and always will prefer Pokemon Sapphire over Pokemon Ruby or Emerald. Ruby because tribalism. And Emerald because I personally think Emerald didn't do it as well. Don't get me wrong, Emerald is better in a lot of respects. But I think they did the story a little bit dirty. Suppose I ought to back up and talk about the story first. So, Ruby and Sapphire were the third generation of Pokemon games, and the first ones not to be a direct sequel. Because Gen 2 was a direct sequel to Gen 1. Gen 3 was not related to the other two. Like, it was the first one not to have Kanto, it was the first one not to have Team Rocket, specifically. And Gen 3 introduced two evil teams this time. It introduced Team Aqua and Team Magma. And which one you battled depended on which game you picked up. Sapphire had Team Aqua and Ruby had Team Magma. Each of them has an equally kind of stupid plan. Team Magma wants to increase the amount of land on the planet, and Team Aqua wants to increase the amount of ocean on the planet, and both are stupid. Both are short-sighted and stupid. Emerald doesn't, because Emerald doesn't have the version-specific teams, it has to have both. Or they could have gone with some kind of mushroom-based team or something, I don't know. Team Mold? Why not? But, no, Team Aqua and Team Magma were both in Emerald, right? And because of this, the story doesn't focus on either one in particular. And if you haven't played Ruby or Sapphire first, Emerald feels not right in terms of the story. The story feels a little bit all over the place. It's swapping between the two teams, neither one really gets a proper focus, and it I don't know. I haven't gotten through that much of Emerald. I know about it just from bits and pieces I've gotten from YouTube videos and such, but I've only ever really played through Sapphire. I've seen a playthrough of Ruby or two. I don't think I've ever watched a full playthrough of Emerald. Emerald feels a little bit disjointed from what I have seen. In terms of the story, in terms of gameplay, it is superior. I've seen that part firsthand, particularly like, out of battle abilities start working in Emerald. They don't exist in Ruby and Sapphire. I should probably talk about some of the specifics to Ruby and Sapphire first. So, Gen 3 introduced a lot of things. Non-chiptune music, and abilities, and Pokemon contests. You like those, right? Everyone likes Pokemon contests. Who are you kidding? It introduced a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff radically changed everything about Pokemon and its gameplay and mechanics. Right? Like, abilities. Abilities didn't exist pre-Gen 3. Things like, I don't know, Rain Dance? Is that a move or an ability? I think that's a move. What are some abilities? Crap. One example being Torrent, the one on the water-type starter of the generation. When you have low health, it ups the power of water moves. And then there are gimmick abilities. Things like, Pickup, which, at the end of a battle, assuming you didn't run away, you have a small chance to pick up an item, and your Pokemon will be holding it. And depending on the game, you'll... So, in Pokemon Emerald, with Pickup, you'll get different items based on what level your Pokemon is, right? So, like, the chart looks like this. Ruby and Sapphire. Ruby and Sapphire didn't have different items based on level. Ruby and Sapphire just had a list of items that it could pull from. Which meant you could get things like Nuggets and Ultra Balls with a level 5 Zigzagoon. It's fantastic, I love it. It's so busted. So yeah, abilities are really cool and completely change the game. Going back to Gen 1 or 2 without abilities at all feels really weird. And there's such an integrated. I have no idea. I don't know which one's correct. It could be both are correct. Anyway. It's a concept that is so built into the games now that you never think about the idea that they might not exist. Like, it really deepens the battle system. There are so many changes from Gens 1 and 2 to 3 that I cannot list them all. There's DVs changing to EVs and IVs, there's abilities, there's other stuff that I can't think of off the top of my head that I was able to think of a moment ago. But it's all also too much to explain in this video. Like, even if I could list all of the ones I can think of, I couldn't fit them into this video without making way too much work for myself, and I'm trying to make these shorter. So, yeah, and so abilities are great and fantastic, and probably part of the reason that they couldn't make it so that you could transfer games from Gens 1 and 2 to 3. Another part of the reason being just a general incompatibility between Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, I guess. But yeah, it with Gen 3 you could not transfer from 1 or 2, which a lot of people were upset about. And then that is also kind of literally the entire reason that they made the Gen 3 remakes. Or the Gen 1 remakes. That's why they made Fire Red and Leaf Green, so that you could still catch them all. But at the same time, Gen 3 was kind of the first generation that gotta catch 'em all was kind of de-incentivized. At least within a single game. You couldn't catch them all in one game anymore. Not even in 2 games. Like, with Gen 1, you could catch everything in 2 games, red and blue. If you've got red and you've got blue, or you've got red and someone else has blue, you can trade and you have the entire Pokedex. In Gen 2, I think you can do... Yeah, I think you can catch them all with just gold and silver. You might need crystal. Gen 3, in order to catch everything, including previous generation Pokemon, you need Ruby and Sapphire, potentially Emerald, probably Emerald, some GameCube spin-offs, that's pretty much it, as far as I can remember. But yeah, you needed 2 Game Boy Advances, 3 Game Boy Advance games, and an entire GameCube and 2 more games. Which is ridiculous, and why? No, why? Don't do that. But without that, a lot of older Pokemon were just locked out. Oh, and events. You had to go to events. With Gen 1 and Gen 2, there were 1 Pokemon apiece. There was Mew in Gen 1 and Celebi in Gen 2. Those you had to go to events for or had to do events, right? With Gen 3, there was Mew and Celebi and Jirachi, and if I recall correctly, you only got 1 of the Lottie twins, so you had to do an event thing for the other one, and it was a mess, and I really don't appreciate that. It costs so much if you want to complete a Gen 3 Dex now. Oh, and you needed Fire Red and Leaf Green. So, make that 4 or 5 Game Boy Advance games, and 2 GameCube games. I completely forgot about Fire Red Leaf Green there. Oops. One Dex costs 7 games and 3 consoles. And if you wanted Jirachi, you had to get a specific version of the I think Pokemon Coliseum that came with a bonus disc. So that's gonna rack you up at least $1,000 overall. Not specifically for the bonus disc, but like, it's just so bloody expensive these days. And even back then it was ridiculous. Let's assume Ruby and Sapphire were $40 a piece. Same with Emerald and Fire Red and Leaf Green. So that's $200 just for the GBA games. Then if I had to guess, probably $80 per GBA. So $360. Plus a GameCube, which... not sure how much a GameCube cost at its cheapest, but like, I'm gonna go with probably $120. So that's $480. You might be able to knock $50 off of that, so like $430. And then Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness would have cost another $40 a piece. That's $510 just to be able to complete the Pokédex, and that was back then. And that's a conservative estimate, I think. So, I don't think catching them all was ever really meant to be attainable in Gen 3, which is probably part of the reason that they got rid of Gotta Catch 'em All on the box. So off of that depressing part of this topic, back to Pokemon Emerald. They in the opening cutscene thing with the, or not opening cutscene, in the cutscene where you get your starter, they replaced Poochyena with a Zigzagoon. Why? Is there a reason? I don't know, whatever. Yeah, a couple of other things. Altering Cave, which was something introduced in Fire Red and Leaf Green and then made its way to Emerald as well, was supposed to be a cave that, depending on different factors and like going to different events and such, would contain different Pokemon. Mostly Gen 2, if I recall correctly. But the events never happened, and so we were left with a cave that just has Zubat. Another unrelated thing, the music. The music, fantastic. It's so brassy, though. Like, though? No, I just like brass. I love the brass they use. It is the Roland Sound Canvas 88 brass. And, or, not, it might have the brass preset, but they used French horns and trumpets for it. And there's just so much, and I love it. The starters. I like the starters. I like all of the different choices. Trico looks cool. I don't really know how he is. I've never actually chosen Trico for a real playthrough of the game. Torchic, fine. I'm currently using Torchic for my Let's Play series, which, by the way, the next part is coming out. Here's, like, half of the episode right now. And, the Torchic line, it's fine. It's a firefighting line, which did get repetitive, but at the time, it was fine. There weren't really any firefighting starters. Or, well, no, there just weren't any firefighting starters as far as I'm aware, and, there weren't a lot of firefighting types. But the Mudkip line. Oh, the Mudkip line. I adore Mudkip. And not just because it was my first starter, although that is definitely part of it. Mudkip and Marshtomp have fantastic designs. Swampert has a pretty good design, I would say. But Mudkip and Marshtomp feel so silly and cute, and I love them. And also, Marshtomp and Swampert have such a good type combo. Water plus ground is so good. With Swampert, you will easily sweep the first 4 gyms. Gym 5 is where it starts to get a little bit difficult. But obviously, you're going to sweep Roxanne, obviously you are going to sweep the Rock Gym. Brawly's just kind of a joke usually. I'm just bad at the game, so I failed it. But Brawly's not too bad anyway. The fighting type joke is not too difficult anyway. The electric gym, the third one, you've got a ground type. You've got a ground type just built into your back pocket. And the fourth gym, water ground. You have a water ground type, which for a fire... The fourth gym is fire type. Water and ground against a fire type gym. EZPZ. And by the time you get to the later gyms, which would be a little bit more difficult with Swampert, those being normal, flying, psychic, and ice, you've got other Pokemon, I would hope. Unless you're me, and just leveling up one Pokemon up to like level 70 by the time you're at the Elite Four. But Swampert, the Mudkip line is, I think, the best choice out of all of them. Now, obviously there's more to the game than just single player because, you know, it's still Pokemon, you still gotta be able to trade in battle. I never got to do that. I only ever played it on the DS/DS Lite, and they don't have Game Boy Advance multiplayer compatibility at all, which is really sad, honestly. So I never got to experience any of that. Which means I also never got to experience mixing records, which, like, that was something you would do with friends. It would, like, change a couple of things in the game. It would, change certain NPCs. It was kind of a neat feature, I guess. I don't really understand a whole lot about it. Now, one change they made from previous generations going into Gen 3 was, in Gen 3 you couldn't trade Pokemon if you only had one Pokemon in your party, or one Pokemon at all, maybe. If you only had one Pokemon, you couldn't trade, which I'm not sure why, because that opens up the possibility for soft locks, which they tried to prevent. They tried to prevent soft locks by making it so that you couldn't release your last user of a couple of HMs. I think Surf and Fly. But you know what you could do? You could put them in the daycare. You could put them in the daycare and then go somewhere else. And if you get yourself stuck somewhere else, like, let's say you've sold all of your items, and you, and you have placed your last Surf user and your last Fly user in the daycare. You then faint and go back to the last Pokemon Center you used, which, for this scenario, we will say is Pacific Log Town. A town with no Pokemon. A town with no way to actually get those Pokemon back. A town in the middle of the water. There is so little to do there. You're probably stuck forever. Especially since you can't trade with only one Pokemon in your party. It's so dumb. Now, oh, I never even talked about the rival. The rival is boring. I'm going to say it. Partially because a lot of other people have, and I have to agree. If you're playing as Brendan, May is boring. If you're playing as May, Brendan is boring. They're just so milquetoast. They're there as, you know, the character you have to fight sometimes. But, like, there's nothing really particularly interesting to the characters at all. They're just kind of there. They're not looking to be the very best. They're just like, hey, let's fight, because we're rivals. And in fact, their main motivation is completing the dex instead of trying to beat you or anything. Which kind of barely makes them a rival, right? But and when you win, they don't even get upset. They're just like, oh, good job, you won. Very nice. I'm gonna go back to doing my thing. But, here, yeah, great, you did it. That's cool. I don't know. They feel like they have zero actual rivalry with you. But if you don't like them, there's always the other rival. Yes, Gen 3 did the insane thing of giving you a second rival, who, is also boring, but in a different way. Wally also has very little going for him. He's kind of shy, has very little character arc, other than he wants to be a trainer. And then you get him a Pokemon, and eventually you see his family and they're like, he's been so happy since he got that Pokemon. And you fight him like a couple of times, the last one being at the end of Victory Road, and his whole thing is just being timid and occasionally battling you. Now, is he a bad character? Not necessarily, but I do think he needs some work. But we'll get back to that. Now, a lot of the fun of Gen 3 is not just playing the games. There is a prolific ROM hack scene, right? Generation 3 came out right at the real boom of the internet, right? That was when people could realistically start sharing files with each other. And that meant that the little edits people might do to a game became shareable. So a lot more people would do it. And a lot more people would make tools to do that. And Pokemon Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and Fire and Leaf Green, they got ROM hacked so hard. And they're still being ROM hacked. People are still making hacks of these games. There's an entire disassembly you can use. I think it's a disassembly, it might be a decomp. But you can make edits to semi-source code and then rebuild the game. Now, you don't even need to modify the ROM binary directly anymore. And it is wild. If you look for a Pokemon ROM hack, there is a probably 85 to 90% chance that whatever ROM hack you look at is going to be for Gen 3. Might even be a higher chance than that. Gen 3 is the most modded and most moddable generation of Pokemon. Precisely because people have been doing it for so long. Now, of course, if ROM hacking isn't your thing and you would prefer to play it in a weird way but without using, like, an emulator or a flash card, you have some options, namely challenge runs. You can play Pokemon with self-imposed rules, as you can with any game, really. But Pokemon, and often Gen 3, gets a lot of that. Look at the most prolific example of a challenge run for Pokemon. The Nuzlocke, which, was not the original name. It was originally called Pokemon Hard Mode. And it was somebody playing through Pokemon Ruby, I believe, using a set of self-imposed rules. Namely, when Pokemon faint, they're considered dead, and you have to either release them or keep them in a box. You have to catch the first Pokemon of each route, you have to nickname it so that you get attached to it. And those are the main rules. And you cannot catch more than one Pokemon per route. That started with Gen 3. The reason it's called the Nuzlocke now is because of the person who originally did it catching a Nuzleaf that they named after, I think, Ryan Locke or something like that. Let me look that up. I'm sorry. It was not Ryan Locke. It was John Locke. It was a Nuzleaf named after John Locke from Lost. And because this was a recurring sort of character in this challenge run, people called the run a Nuzlocke run. I think I don't know. And it just kind of stuck. And so now the run is called Nuzlocke, and it's been applied to a lot of Pokemon games, not just Gen 3, but Gen 3 is where it started. Now, of course, Gen 3 being as old as it is, eventually it wasn't really playable on modern hardware, because, you know, the 3DS doesn't have a Game Boy Advance port. So they remade Gen 3 on the 3DS. Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It included some changes from Emerald, but overall they were remakes of Ruby and Sapphire. And they changed a good bit. Like, the story beats are the same, approximately. But a lot of character designs were tweaked, if not all of the character designs. The games were actual 3D now. Not even like this sort of 2D, 3D stuff that the DS was doing. It was actual full 3D like Pokemon X and Y. Battle mechanics were changed. We got the physical special split. We got Mega Evolutions. And they actually gave Wally any kind of character arc. I don't remember a whole lot about him still. Goes to show how forgettable of a character he is overall. But, like, they gave him something. And it was kind of necessary. Because, like, I don't think I would have remembered him at all if Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire hadn't done something with him. But Wally does kind of become your rival. It's like a learning to be less timid kind of story, but they actually make him less timid. Of course, the music still slaps so hard. I love the remake. I need to end this recording because it's getting to 50 minutes again, and I don't want that, man. So, the moral of the story is, Sapphire is the objectively correct option. And this has been Coffee with Bann.